Street photography at nighttime can be hard. It took me a long time before I was comfortable shooting at nighttime and capturing images in the evening. So in this episode, I'm going to share some tips and advice on getting started, and hopefully it will inspire you to go out and shoot night times as well. First thing first, gear. So when it comes to camera gear, you're going to want to use the fastest lens you have. If you have an f2, shoot with an f2. If you have a lens which is f1.4, shoot with that. Faster lenses are going to let in more light, and during the nighttime there isn't that much light around, so having a faster lens is going to be an advantage. Now, you do not need an expensive prime lens to go out and shoot at nighttime. I often use the Fujifilm 35mm f2 or the 50 f2, and those are some of Fujifilm's cheapest lenses. When you are shooting at nighttime, try to set your aperture as wide as possible. So as I said earlier, if you have an f2 lens, shoot at f2. If you have an f1.4, shoot at f1.4. Allowing more light into your lens is going to allow you to shoot at a higher shutter speed and also keep your ISO low. More on both of those shortly. When it comes to focal length, it really is up to you. With a 16mm or a 23mm, I tend to find more interesting locations and then wait for subjects to walk into frame. Whereas if I'm shooting with, say, the 56-1.2 or the 90mm lens, I'm capturing more abstract photos, I'm looking for colors, I'm looking for more textures. So the lens can really dictate what type of photos you're going to capture, but which lens you take, that's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong answer. If you were to have a look at the photos I take from the back of my camera, or you had a look at my Lightroom library, you'd probably notice that the majority of the photos I take are underexposed. And this is for good reason. The reason I choose to underexpose the photos I take is to preserve the highlight details. Now, with most digital cameras in the modern day, they're really good at retrieving details out of shadows, but not so good when it comes to retrieving details out of highlights. The easiest and simplest way to underexpose your photos is to use the exposure compensation dial. Just move it down to the point where your highlights aren't overblown, and don't worry if the rest of the scene is really dark. Usually you can pull that out in post. It's also worth noting that you should always shoot in RAW format and not in JPEG. When you shoot RAW, your camera captures far more data in those shadows and in the highlights. So when you bring that photo into an app like Lightroom, it's much easier to raise the shadows and save the highlights. In general, RAW files just capture more dynamic range and data, whereas JPEGs is a bit more compressed, it's a smaller file, so you're getting less data in there. Also, when you shoot in RAW, you don't have to worry about your white balance because you can change that in post. Now at nighttime, because there's so many different types of light and different types of light colors, it's actually quite easy for your camera to get confused and set the wrong white balance. So when you shoot in RAW, you don't have to worry about that, because when you bring it into, say, Lightroom, you can just adjust the white balance and correct it there. When it comes to shutter speed, unless you want to bring some motion and blur into your photo for creative reasons, try to keep your shutter speed at least double your focal length. So if you have a 30mm lens, keep your shutter speed at least a 60th. Or if you have a 90mm lens, keep it at 180th, and so on. Also, for those of you starting out, if you are worried about taking blurry photos or you're having trouble stabilizing your camera, then just shoot in burst mode. So with burst mode, you'll be shooting multiple photos within the same second, and usually 2 or 3 of those photos will be sharp and there will be no blur. Finally, on the settings front, when it comes to ISO, don't be afraid to push your ISO higher than normal. So the ISO basically refers to how sensitive your sensor is inside your camera, and the higher the ISO setting, the more sensitive it's going to be to light. So at nighttime on my Fujifilm cameras, I often shoot at 3200, or if it's darker, I will go up to 6400. Now, when you do shoot at higher ISOs, you do bring in digital noise to your images, but that really depends on your camera. So with Fujifilm cameras, I find at 3200 or 6400, there isn't too much noise, but if I push it too far, then the image will start to get muddy. This will change depending on the camera you're using. So I'd say experiment with different ISOs to begin with and kind of find an upper limit that you're happy with. So this is a technique I loved using when I started out doing street photography at nighttime, and I still use it too. The fishing technique basically means you find a composition, you find a setting that you like, you line up your shot, and you just stand there and wait until the right subject comes into frame. Now this is far easier and far less intimidating than walking up to people with a camera and taking photos of them, especially at nighttime. At nighttime, people tend to be a bit more on guard and there's just not that many people around. So if you're walking around with a camera taking photos of them, they're definitely going to notice you. So I tend to find an interesting spot, find an interesting perspective of that spot, and then just wait until the right person walks in the frame. I capture them, and as I said, they just walk on. They haven't noticed me, I haven't really disturbed them, and there's far less issues. My final tip when it comes to shooting at night is just to get creative. Your photos don't have to be pin sharp or technically perfect. Those types of images are usually pretty boring. And don't be afraid to slow your shutter speed down, capture some movement, capture some blur, because they can often help tell a story or add some emotion to a photo. So don't be discouraged or be afraid to bring some of the imperfections from the street into your images, and just get creative and have fun with it. On a side note, do stay safe when you're out there shooting at nighttime. Obviously, shooting at night can be a little more dangerous than shooting during the daytime. So if you're new to this, stick in the places which are a bit more busy and well lit. Also, don't use headphones or earphones. You're going to want to be fully aware of what's going on around you. And again, if you are new to this or you are a bit nervous, go out shooting with your friends. It'll be more fun and a lot safer too. So just have fun with it, stay safe, and hopefully this episode has inspired you to go out and shoot. If you have any questions about shooting at nighttime, drop them in the comments down below and I will get back to you. A big thanks for watching this episode. If you want to support the channel, hit the thumbs up and subscribe as well. Again, thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.